Thank you for your time today. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk about the use of the Hogan 360. We first designed it 20 years ago to measure behaviour and reputation and give people the opportunity to improve. We were thrilled 6 years ago when the Hogan Assessments business badged it as a global Hogan 360. So today we're going to talk to you, Shayne and I, about different coaching methods, about how to get the best out of the assessment and how to have the best impact on the coachee. Shayne, can I hand over to you and you tell us about your coaching style? And remember, there's no right or wrong. It's a question of who's the person being coached, what does their data look like, and doing a really good preparation.
Okay, thanks Peter. I'm going to talk about actually how I prepare for a Hogan 360 debrief. And I picked a more difficult assignment in that Lee Sample actually has had quite a disappointing 360. And I always go to page 2 and look at the raters. It's quite important to understand the rater group, how many they are, and what the implications of those raters might be. Lee actually has 2 managers, 7 peers, 3 direct reports, and 6 stakeholders. In Lee's case, he works in a matrix-driven organisation where he actually reports into 2 managers. In high potential programs, however, we often see separate raters. One might be the person's direct manager, and the second one might be the manager of that person. For Lee's results, he scored 4.9. He had a total of 18 raters, and he's in the bottom 10th percentile. So this is going to be a challenging debrief, and also as part of your preparation, you need to spend quite a bit of time to make sure that you cover all aspects to ensure that you can feel comfortable talking to Lee about his results. On page 4, I always draw a line across the top 10, and then I go through with a pen and I mark whether the individual is above or below that global benchmark score. And as you would expect for Lee, he is below that on the majority of those 10 items. I then look at the bottom 10. The bottom 10 become quite important because you do get to see some clusters. And in his case, I've identified the items that cluster together, such as, this person is effective in coaching and developing others. This person challenges poor performance. Those 2 are directly related. So as I'm preparing to debrief, I'm thinking all the time, how am I going to deliver this news actually to Lee? On the next page, page 6, we look at the model itself. I'm not going to go into detail about that for this purpose, but what we do see is how the total numbers are reflected against the global benchmark. Self-management came in at 5.1, relationship management came in at 4.8, working in the business came in at 5, and working on the business came in at 4.7. His behavioural competencies, which we often refer to as EQ, is at 4.9, and his business competencies are at 4.8. So under the competency framework, we then look at the mapping of the 50 items against management competencies, which he has actually come in with a 5, and leadership competencies at 4.7. So the message here is what has really brought him down is very much in the EQ people area. On the next page, there is a graphical representation, and what we see here, his capability under working in the business is at 5.6. So we're talking about a capable person, a technical specialist who is really quite challenged with managing the people issues as he's transitioned roles. I then move on to the breaking up of the relevant domains. And I'll use self-management as an example here. What becomes very obvious here, his overall rating is at 5.1 for self-management. His managers rate him 3.9. His peers rate him 4.7. His reports rate him 5.4, but the key stakeholders rate him at 5.7. So his own rating on self-management is at 5.4. So when we look at how we've broken up the results by the different classifications, straight away we see a big difference between the way other people see him and the way he sees himself. On some items within self-management, he's rated himself as a 6. So this is going to be a challenging discussion with Lee. There is one area where he self-reflects and actually rates himself quite similar to the other raters, and that's around resilience. So he clearly is somebody that has trouble coping with some of the stress related to his role. I follow the same pattern all the way through the various subsets, moving from self-management, relationship management, working in the business where no surprises is his gold star, and working on the business again, there is significant differences between the rater groups. And I'll draw this one out as an example. Under the set of accountability, his managers gave him a 1.8. He gave himself a 5.3. The peers gave him a 3.4. The reports gave him a 5.9. The stakeholders gave him a 5.3. So we're seeing a constant pattern of different positions between the various stakeholders. I further analyse this when we get to the frequency tables at the back of the report. On page 14, there are scores by themes, and again, exactly as I did previously, I go to the trouble of actually looking at his overall score, his self-rating, whether he's rated himself overall above or below, whether how the managers rate him, the peers, the reports and the stakeholders, and I put an arrow going up and down. That gives me a very clear visual about the way in which the various raters are rating the individual. On the themes and questions review, located on page 15, we can clearly see the variation in the various rater groups. This is a graphical representation of the data on the previous pages. It helps different people see things differently. Some people like data, other people like that graphical representation. So we're now moving on to the strengths and opportunities table. From thousands of qualitative pieces indicated by people undertaking 360s, their raters, we've come up with 26 items that people often refer to as people's top strengths. We only ask people to pick 4. We only ask them to pick 4, and those 4 are weighted. So the first one gets 4 votes, the second one 3, 2, then 1. So what we want to know here is what are the key strengths that Lee will be able to leverage off in his everyday at work. And what we see here, his solid technical ability is again a key strength. It actually got 48 votes. Suggests new and innovative ideas is actually rated 2, but the global benchmark for that item is actually 20. So he looks different to other people in the worksite, in that he's quite innovative. Hence the reason why potentially his stakeholders gave him more positive responses. Strong communication skills, he came in as his 3rd, and is steady and calm under pressure came in as fourth. The communication skills fit with the new and innovative ideas, which means he's quite good at communicating those to others. So again, that would be a strength in his particular work site. When we look at his top opportunities to improve, what we see here is that generally he has scored differently to most other people in the global benchmark. His number one is to share knowledge and resources. That's normally number 6. Be action oriented and make it happen is normally number 17. Show leadership on issues is normally number 5, and it's 3 for him. More customer and client focus is number 4, and it's normally at 21. So he does look a little bit different from a strengths and an opportunities point of view. On page 19, we then get into written comments. We ask people to say, you know, what do you see every day for Lee as his strengths? And I do a word search. In this case, I've underlined key items, and knowledgeable came up 8 times. So the next highest rated item was communication. So what we're seeing here is confirming data from the 50 questions, from the strengths and opportunities table, and now we're seeing it also appear in the comments. We then look at his opportunities to improve, and share knowledge came up as an opportunity to improve, leadership being more assertive, and there was also a comment there about being emotional. One of the other key areas when you're looking at the comments is they're broken up by rater group. And of course, his managers have provided more significant comments than the peers and the direct reports. So often when you're preparing for this, you will be thinking to say, well, in my discussions with Lee, he may need to have a far more adaptive style and a far more responsive to his various rater groups or his customers, his stakeholders, versus his direct reports who are looking for coaching and development, versus his managers who have much higher expectation for him to deliver on a day-to-day basis. The final written comment section is, are there any strengths overplayed? And this occurs when people are under stress and pressure. It's not their day-to-day, but it's when they're under stress and pressure. And we pick up that final item that we saw in one of the other 50 questions can get a bit temperamental from time to time. So not all the time, but people made that comment. There is a development plan, the standard development plan, which is attached to the 360, where we're thinking already about, so what are going to be the key things he needs to keep, things he might need to start doing and stop doing, and that different target audience might need to be considered as you work with Lee, or in my case, when I work with Lee, around that development plan. What I do like, and often I spend a lot of time on the frequency table here, because with a 360 like this, you're going to get a lot of concerns from people about outliers. Oh, did someone give me a 1? Or did someone give me a 2? And in this case, there is quite a spread of raters. The frequency table is broken up by manager, peer reports and the stakeholders. And what we see all the way through Lee's results is that the managers regularly rate him poorer than the peers and the direct reports and the stakeholders. The most positive people are his direct reports and his stakeholders. So by understanding where people actually have rated him by each item, it allows you to have a more comprehensive conversation. There is the option, and we did see this used quite a bit by the stakeholders, for people to rate it as not applicable. They just may not have had a visibility over that particular item. And that option of not applicable allows them to opt out, if you like, of rating that item. The trend continues all the way through self-management, relationship management, people skills, relationship management around team player, customer, the working in the business. Very much we see the managers as quite significant outliers in working in the business. And also on the item of efficiency, they've marked him down lower. Working in the business again, those results, there's a lot of variation, particularly with the managers. What is interesting in one of the rater groups, particularly the peers here, is about saying the person consistently delivers a good result. The peers were quite concerned about the inability to do that. And on one of the items there about producing high quality error-free work, one peer rated Lee as a 2. The working on the business, the accountability, the motivation, strategy, and also the innovation there, the stakeholders' ratings on innovation were quite high. I then look at the rate of frequencies by how many people actually gave the highest rating to the strengths. And that technical ability, 8 people rated it either as the highest or the second highest or third highest or fourth highest. So that's a pretty solid result there. Likewise, 8 people also rated part of the suggest new and innovative ideas as a strength, but no one made it their first strength. So it was a peripheral item for them around that. But the real strength here is definitely the technical ability. And that will allow you to have a more positive initial conversation around the results overall. In the case of the opportunities, however, share knowledge and resources, 7 people rated him as either their first item or their second item or their fourth item. And 7 people also rated him as being more action oriented. So not only do they want to tap into his knowledge, they also want him to get things done, be more action oriented and complete the task. So the final part for me is always looking at, well, what's the standard deviation on each of those as you go through the frequency tables as well. After doing that, I sort of feel like I've got a pretty good handle about how I'm going to plan to deliver these results to Lee. It will obviously need to be done in a sensitive and caring way. And we'll need to be able to lead the discussion with some action items, and in his case, a very comprehensive action item, because his stakeholders and his direct reports, his peers and his managers on a number of items want different things from him.
Thank you, Shayne. And by the way, I thought the way you did your presentation was pretty first class. It is a 31-page report. And it is logically set up to go through the pages the way you did it.
Thank you.
So if most of the coaches follow that program, they're going to be in pretty good ground. So first of all, I try to get some context around why are we doing the coaching? Is it just a coaching piece? Are they an executive and it's part of an executive program? Are they in a leadership development program? So I try to think the organisation is spending time and money on this person. We've got their 360, and I'm trying to understand then what's their job role, where do they sit in the hierarchy, do they lead a team of employees, what are their KPIs, is the organisation successful or going through difficult times? Because when the person walks in for the coaching session, if it's face to face, we want them to feel comfortable, relaxed, open to learning. So that's the first step. The second step is I like to look at a quick overview of how the person has fared in the 360. So I've got one that's called Maria Sample. It's very different from Shayne's Lee because this lady got a fantastic result. So for me, I'll tell you the first 3 steps I do. I have a look at the score on page 3 because of our global benchmarks. It's a very powerful percentile benchmark. So in this case with Maria, I've highlighted she got a 6.3. It puts her certainly up in the top 10 percentile. So unlike Lee, this is going to be a positive, very positive discussion. Maria's going to feel over the moon, very happy with the data. So I look at the percentile, the score. Then I go to page 17 and 18, which very unequivocally tells us a person's strengths and a person's opportunities. These 2 pages are very unique because, Shayne, what happens is all of the raters, in this case it was 13 for Maria, they didn't talk to each other, but they've congregated around the top 4 or 5 strengths and opportunities on both pages. This is why it's so powerful. So I can see here Maria, very strong leadership skills, visionary, positive, sets goals. Then we look at the opportunities, and she's got to listen a little bit more, stop spreading herself a little bit too thin, and there was a little bit of aggression. She can be a bit pushy and demanding. The third thing I do is I read the written comments very carefully. I get my highlighter pen out, and for example, under her strengths, 8 comments were made about her being an outstanding leader. So that supports the strengths table. Then we go to the opportunities, and 5 people said she's got to listen more, and that reflected back on the opportunities table. Then very much a Hogan type question, strengths being overused. She got told you're too dominant, you're single-minded, you're overly assertive, a little bit arrogant, and that just supported the aggression. So what I've then got is at a very high level an understanding of Maria's score, her strengths and opportunities, the narrative from the text, and then I'm ready to take a deeper dive into the Hogan 360. So the 4-quadrant model, which we see as an introduction right at the very start, and this was done in conjunction with Dr. Robert Hogan 18 years ago, and we both sat down and said this would be a perfect global and generic competency model. Self-management, the person's got to turn up with integrity and resilience. Relationship management, you've got to use emotionally intelligent behaviour to build and sustain key relationships. Working in the business, your daytime job, otherwise you shouldn't be on the payroll. Working on the business, adding some strategic value. So that's the 4 models. And what we do is allocate the 50 questions. The top 2 are your emotionally intelligent learned behaviours. The bottom 2 are business capabilities, both working in the business, working on the business. And then we slice and dice those 4 into 14 competencies, which Shayne has already referred to. And you can see very quickly on a scale of 1 to 7, the ones that were high and the ones that were low. So we showed you Lee, and I can show you how Maria went, and Maria's done very well. There's a lot of items here that were higher than 6. So she's got a lot of strengths. In fact, there was only 1 item that was below 6, which is quite outstanding, and it was resilience. So that's that little bit of aggression that she might be bringing to work. So now we've taken a deep dive. We've got lots of detail, lots of information, and we can look at how the different raters rated her. Shayne's done a great job already breaking it down by manager, peers, reports and others. So that's pretty good. Now then, in the coaching session, I spend a lot of time on page 17 and 18 because this is the way forward. This is where you spend 90% of your time putting a development plan together off these 2 pages. Now with the strengths, we don't want to just record, keep doing these strengths. That's too easy. You've got to say, how can you leverage those strengths? So in Maria's case, she's got strong leadership skills as a number 1. So the keep doing will be, keep bringing my strong leadership skills to work and build a high-performing team that delivers exceptional results. That's how you would leverage it. Number 2, visionary and strategic. Make sure you've got a strategic planning cycle, quarterly reviews, second-tier plans, KPIs running right down to the bottom of the food chain. So there you keep doing. Then you go into stop doing and start doing. So start listening a little bit more, stop being a little bit aggressive, stop spreading yourself too thin. And we talk about what are the behaviours we're going to take away or start bringing. So we actually populate it with some examples, and this bit is made easier by referring to the written comments, because the written comments actually tell you what they want to see stop doing and start doing. The development plan, every time we print the 360, there is a little development plan. It just simply has the keep doing, stop doing, start doing. So unless you've got something a bit more additional, this is a simple way to capture a few notes. I sometimes also get them to write down what is your motivation to improve, because unless we can unpack their motivation on this journey, they probably won't get there. This could end up being a ho-hum report that goes in your bottom drawer. And I also ask a second question, what are the resources you need on this journey? And it could be some training, some practice on the job, their manager keeping them honest, or having a mentor.
Peter, you did a lot of work on development activity guides for people, sort of qualified users, to assist them, and also a feedback guide, which is sort of a phase-by-phase feedback guide checklist to provide people with additional information. Tell me a little bit about the development activity guides and why you did that.
Thank you, Shayne. One of the things that I think PBC prides itself on is the quality of the supporting materials for those using our Hogan 360. We have extensive research, we have sample reports, we have the development guide for those that are a little bit new to the Hogan 360, which takes all of the 26 opportunities on page 18 and says, depending on which one is 1, 2 and 3, these are some of the things to think about to capture in a development plan. The feedback guide is just a structured checklist of how to do a good feedback.
Yeah.
We've also got the Why Hogan 360, which is available to everyone too, which is a little bit about why the Hogan 360 is so powerful.
And you've also shared with the certified users some PowerPoints in the event that they're going to be doing group debriefing and coaching as well. Tell us a bit about those.
So sometimes we use a group activity. It could be an executive, it could be a leadership development program cohort. And if you've got a group, it's quite challenging then to hand out all the individual 360s and be able to coach them in a professional way. So that supporting material is our best practice checklist, if you like, about how to handle a group debrief.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing these days is getting the group then to help coach everybody in the room around the development plan. Keep a bit of peer pressure, but a trusting environment that they can all learn from each other. So overall, an executive summary. The Hogan 360 is a fantastic tool. It holds its weight globally, there's no doubt about that. If you're trying to capture someone's brand at a point in time, it's best done by using the 360. And brand is everything. It's the most important asset any manager has. We give you a score, we give you the development opportunities, and it's all about behavioural change to enhance one's reputation, which is the most important thing everybody's got to be self-aware of. And the purpose of doing this is that we think leadership drives engagement and engagement drives results. So if you can change behaviour, you're actually driving your reputation, probably being a better leader of your team and probably delivering better bottom line results. So there is a return on investment for most organisations in using the 360. For individuals to make the change, they've got to be motivated. That requires deliberate practice. It involves building new mental muscle so the new habits and competencies become second nature. And we take a lot of success about helping people to step up and get better results in all of this. And at the end of the day, the world's a better place if we've got better leaders driving engagement and achieving their goals. A final comment about how important it is to prepare properly and anticipate how the conversation is going to go with the person. You can tell from the 360 what their strengths and opportunities are. You can predict how they might feel about that feedback. So I think, again, do your preparation of the 360 thoroughly. Get some organisational feedback about why we're doing the 360. What's the purpose and intent? Frame it positively. This is an investment in their development. And then make sure at the end of the coaching session, when they've got their development plan, you say how you're feeling. What are your emotions and thoughts as you leave this session today? Because we want them to walk away in a safe space.
My only comment is I think from talking to people as part of the debriefing process is getting them engaged that feedback is actually a gift. The sooner you get in your career, the better leader you're going to be. You're going to be able to transition in jobs, you're going to actually feel more comfortable in a range of leadership roles. So getting that leadership feedback early in your career I think is vital, and it is a gift.